Last week, I posted a devlog asking my subscribers which features from my in-development project Wazard they would be interested in as tutorial videos. There were a lot of requests, but the most requested feature was the room transitions. Hi, my name is Ben, and in this intermediate Godot tutorial, I'll show you how I created the room transitions in Wazard. Here's a project with some basic setup. You can see I've got a dungeon room, and in this dungeon room I have the walls here to prevent the player from going outside the level. And I have a player detector, which is an area 2D that occupies the center of the dungeon, and this is going to detect when the player has entered this room. I've also set up 4 doors here, which are an area 2D with you can see they've all got a collision shape on them as well. So they're an area 2D with a collision shape. And there's a marker 2D on that, and we'll get into why we have that a bit later. I also have a player character with a simple script for moving the character around. And then I have the world scene, and in the world scene I've placed the player character and these dungeons. My level generation handles the dungeons usually, but for this example, I've just placed them in the room manually. I also have a camera here, and the dungeon has a script, and the camera has a script. Now the dungeon is going to need to talk to the camera when the player enters the dungeon to tell the camera to move to that room. To do this, I've created an event singleton script, and there's nothing inside of here yet, but it will work as an intermediary between the dungeon and the camera. And this event script is the event script is an auto load, so it's a singleton. So first, we need to create a signal inside of our event script. We'll call this signal room entered. And it will take an argument of the room that was just entered. Then we can come into our dungeon room, and we can do select our player detector, area 2D, and we can do a body entered signal and connect it to the dungeon room script. So on player detector, body entered. Here, we can just call events dot room entered dot emit, and then pass in self as the argument. That way we know which room the player just entered. Pretty simple. Now we can come into our cameras script, and we can create a ready function. And inside of here, we can connect to that signal. So we'll say events dot room entered dot connect. And we're going to connect it to an anonymous function. Now don't forget to pass in the room that we're entering into the function as an argument. And then we can say global position equals room dot global position. Now, when we run the game, if our player goes and moves into the next room, it looks like they just teleport, but really they've entered the next room. And so the final thing is to actually turn on position smoothing on our camera 2D. And I found a value of 10 works pretty well. And then when our character moves into the next room, the camera will transition over to this next room. And we can move back, or we can go up here and come back down here. Now, the problem with the system right now, this is the very basics of the system. So we're 4 minutes into the video, you've got the gist, right? The problem is that there's like this weird zone in between, right? Limbo zone. And so the solution that I implemented in Wazard for that limbo zone were the doors. So let's come into our door here. Now, we need to make sure that our door can detect the player. And in fact, inside of the dungeon room, the player detector needs to be able to detect the player as well, obviously. So I've had that area 2D on the player's mask so that it can detect that that layer. The player is on layer 2, and the player detector has a mask for 2, so it can find it. So our door needs to have that as well. It's on the same as the player. Then we can add, I've got this marker 2D that I was telling you about. We can click on it and drag it and then hold Control and drop it and get access to that marker 2D now. We'll select our door, and in our door we'll do a body entered, connect to body entered here. So when a body enters the door, we know it's going to be the player because we're on detecting the player. We can say player or body dot global position equals marker 2D dot global position. Now, what's that going to do right now? It's going to be kind of funny because the marker is actually centered. But each time we enter the body, it's going to center us, kind of snap us to that body. What we want to do is alter that marker so that it's in the correct position to snap our player to the other room and remove that limbo zone. So we'll snap to a position in the other room. So if we come to our dungeon room here, what I'm going to do, I think, here is I'm actually going to just duplicate the sprite for the room. I'm going to duplicate this, and then I'm going to hold Alt to make sure I'm... Actually, I'll hold Shift and just use the arrow keys to move it. There we go. I've positioned it over there. Now that I've positioned it over there, I can come to the door right here, and I can do editable children, select the marker here, and to make sure that I'm selecting this marker, I have it selected over here, and then I'm going to hold Alt, and then I can drag it over here, and I can use the arrow keys a bit to position it where I want to. So maybe you want to be careful because you don't want to hit the door on this side because then it will snap you back the other way. So you have to be kind of careful about that. And if we look at this position for our marker in the inspector, we can see that its transform is 94 to the right, and that's from its parent. So I think we could probably come back a few pixels, maybe 92. We'll risk it. We'll try and we'll risk that. So now if we find dungeon door left, we can do editable children. And instead of manually positioning it, we can just do it here in the transform. We can say minus 92, right? That's what we did over here, I think. Yep, positive 92. Then I've manipulated this one to negative 92, so it goes the opposite direction. Now I'm going to take that second dungeon sprite again. I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to position it up here. Now this is tricky because it's not actually positioned correctly. So we're going to have to move it by individual pixels by not holding Shift. And it looks like it needs to be up 2. Now this is just because my dungeon sprite doesn't actually take up the whole view. If your dungeon sprite took up the whole view, if it was the correct size essentially, then you wouldn't have to worry about this little 2 pixel offset here. Okay, now we'll come to door up, right click, do editable children. We can select our marker. I'm just going to hold Shift and move it up a few. Honestly, that looks pretty good. We'll try that. And then we'll come to, let's look at its transform, minus 64. Now we'll come to door down, right click, editable children, have the marker, hold Shift. Well, we'll go down by positive 64. Okay. Now, there's going to be a problem with this. Let's delete this second sprite for now. Okay, we don't need it anymore. We can see where these doors are going to send our player, right? And there's a possible problem with this, okay? So here, we're going to talk about the problem real quick. The problem is I enter this door and it pops my player up here, right? But then the player is far enough down that they actually touch this door and it pops them right back down again, and then they're swapping between the 2 doors fast. So we'll see if we get that behavior. Let's come to the right here. Okay, that works. Good. Then we'll come up And it looks like up works, but down doesn't. So why doesn't down work? Well, our player right here, because of the perspective, there's a lot more collision above them than there is below them. So when they go down, they're actually colliding with the door. And so our door down is going to need, this marker is going to need to come down a little farther. I can grab the marker here and I can move it down. Now, to get a better idea, I can duplicate the sprite again and move the duplicate down and try and get a better idea of where this needs to go. 1, 2, go 2 down again. So here's our door down marker. And our player's collision is pretty high up here. So we're gonna have to move this down to maybe like here. And let's test that. There we go. Okay. So the positioning of that marker is going to be up to you and your specific game. You just want to watch out for that behavior where the player can run into this door on the other side again and then get sent right back, right? You have to position it down far enough. But it shouldn't be too hard to set up those positions yourself. And then once they're set up, you never have to worry about it again. And that's how it works in Wazard. So thank you all so much for watching this tutorial video about how I set up the room transitions in Wazard. And of course, there's going to be some fine tuning and tweaking with where you position the markers and where you position the door steps in order to get it to feel natural, right? The collisions for these doors might be a little too close to the edge here. In the actual game, I might have them a little bit farther in. Thanks again for watching this. If you liked it and enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. If Wazard looks interesting to you, I'll have a little short clip of the game here. Then you can go wishlist it on Steam. That helps me a bunch. And I will see you all later.